I was 16 years old when my mother looked me in the eyes in front of our extended family and said the words that would define the rest of my life: "You don't deserve to be called my daughter." The summer day was warm and golden, the kind of Connecticut afternoon that seemed perfect for a family reunion. Our sprawling house in the affluent suburbs had been transformed for the occasion. White tablecloths covered the long tables in the backyard. Lilies and roses adorned every surface. Relatives had traveled from across the country to gather, laugh, and celebrate our family's legacy. But for me, that day became the stage for a public execution of my worth. The memory is etched into my consciousness with surgical precision. I can still see the way the afternoon light filtered through the oak trees, casting dappled shadows across my mother's face. I can still hear the clinking of glasses and the murmur of conversation that fell silent as her words rang out. I can still feel the heat of humiliation spreading across my cheeks, the tightening in my chest, the desperate urge to disappear into the ground. My mother, Victoria Voss, was a force of nature. Beautiful, ambitious, and ruthlessly image-conscious, she had built a successful real estate career through sheer force of personality. She knew how to work a room, how to charm clients, how to project an image of effortless perfection. Our family was part of that image. We were the Vosses, the family with the beautiful home, the successful parents, the accomplished children. In my mother's world, appearances were everything. My father, Richard, was a corporate lawyer who had learned early in their marriage that keeping the peace meant staying silent. He loved me in his quiet, distant way, but he had never been able to stand up to my mother. When she made decisions, he nodded. When she attacked, he looked away. He was an absent presence, physically present but emotionally unavailable, a man who had surrendered his voice years ago. My younger sister, Madison, was 3 years my junior. She had been the golden child from the moment she was born, a beautiful baby with my mother's features and a charm that seemed to come naturally. She was effortless in a way I had never been. She didn't have to try for affection, it was lavished upon her. She didn't have to earn approval, it was given freely. She learned early that her position in the family hierarchy was secure, and she played it to her advantage. I was the older daughter. The responsible one. The one who tried too hard, who cared too much, who could never quite measure up. I had straight A's, participated in extracurricular activities, helped around the house without being asked, and tried desperately to earn my mother's approval. But nothing was ever enough. The goalposts were always moving. When I succeeded at one thing, there was always something else I should have done better, always someone else who was doing more. The incident that shattered everything happened because of Madison. She had been caught lying about her grades and skipping school, a pattern that had been growing for months. Her teachers had called. The school counselor had reached out. My mother, who prided herself on being the perfect parent, was furious. But her fury, as always, was redirected. We were all gathered at the reunion, aunts and uncles and cousins and grandparents filling the house with noise and laughter. I had been helping in the kitchen, carrying platters of food, trying to stay busy and invisible. My mother had been in the garden, holding court, basking in the attention. Then, in the middle of the afternoon, she called everyone together. I should have known something was wrong. The tone of her voice, the sharp edge beneath the pleasant surface, was a warning I had learned to recognize. But I was too busy, too focused on getting through the event without incident, to prepare myself for what was coming. "Everyone, I want to say something," my mother announced, her voice carrying across the yard. "I've been thinking a lot about family lately, about what it means to be a mother, about what I want for my children." She paused, looking around at the assembled relatives. Her eyes found me, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I've always believed that being a parent means making hard choices, holding your children accountable, teaching them responsibility. And sometimes, that means acknowledging when they've failed. When they've disappointed you. When they've shown that they don't deserve the love you've given them. The words hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "Elena, come here," my mother said, gesturing me forward. I walked toward her on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. My vision tunneled until all I could see was her face, beautiful and cold, her smile sharp as a knife. "Your sister has been struggling," my mother announced to the gathered crowd. "She's made mistakes, as young people do." And who was responsible? Who was supposed to guide her? Who failed? She looked at me, and I realized with dawning horror that she was blaming me for Madison's actions. My mother's eyes narrowed. "Elena, you're the older sister. You should have been watching out for her. You should have helped her. Instead, you were selfish, focused on your own pursuits, ignoring your responsibilities. You failed. You failed as a sister." "But Mom, I started, my voice shaking. "You don't deserve to be called my daughter," she said coldly, cutting me off. "After everything I've done for you, after all the opportunities I've given you, this is how you repay me?" Then, with a practiced smile that looked almost genuine, she put her arm around Madison and turned to face the family. "This is my only child, Madison. She's the one who makes me proud. She's the one who understands what it means to be a Voss." The silence that followed was absolute. I stood frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to speak. My relatives looked away, unable to meet my eyes. My father stared at the ground. Madison smirked behind our mother's back, a flash of triumph that cut deeper than anything else. I was alone. I was invisible. I was nothing. That night I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, tears streaming down my face, and something fundamental broke inside me. The part of me that had always tried to earn my mother's love, the part that believed I could somehow win her approval, the part that desperately wanted to be her daughter, shattered into a million pieces. I didn't sleep. I lay there through the night, replaying the moment over and over, dissecting every word, every gesture, every glance. And as the sun rose over the Connecticut suburbs, I made a decision. I would stop trying. I would stop caring. I would become exactly what she had described, someone who didn't belong to her. The next 2 years were a masterclass in emotional survival. I went through the motions at home, polite and distant, never engaging, never vulnerable. I avoided my mother whenever possible. When I couldn't avoid her, I was civil but cold. The warmth that had once existed, however fragile, had vanished completely. I focused obsessively on my future. I took every advanced class I could. I studied during lunch, during breaks, during the hours I should have been sleeping. I got a job at a local bookstore, working after school and on weekends. I saved every penny, hiding the cash in a small lockbox I kept under my bed. I also started planning my escape. I researched colleges far from Connecticut, far from the suffocating expectations of my family. I applied for scholarships and financial aid, carefully navigating the forms and deadlines on my own. I told no one what I was doing. My mother continued her campaign of rejection. It was subtle at first, a way of erasing me from the family narrative. She would praise Madison's achievements while ignoring mine. She would introduce me to guests with a dismissive tone, making it clear that I was a disappointment. She stopped including me in family photos, finding ways to crop me out or position me at the edges where I could be easily removed. The rejection became a constant companion. I would hear my mother telling relatives about Madison's accomplishments, her beautiful voice, her bright future. I would see her face light up when Madison entered the room. I would watch her shower affection on my sister while I stood in the shadows, invisible, waiting for scraps of attention that never came. Every family dinner was an exercise in emotional endurance. My mother would dominate the conversation, always steering it toward Madison's successes. My father would nod along, never challenging the narrative. Madison would bask in the glow, occasionally throwing me a pitying glance. And I would sit there, silent and still, waiting for the ordeal to end. There were moments when I almost gave up. Moments when I thought about confronting my mother, about demanding an explanation, about fighting for my place in the family. But every time I considered it, I would remember the reunion, the public humiliation, the smirking triumph on Madison's face. And the wall around my heart would grow a little taller, a little thicker. I found small sanctuaries. The bookstore where I worked became a refuge. The school library, where I spent my lunch hours studying. The home of a friend whose family welcomed me without condition. These spaces gave me moments of peace, brief respites from the constant pressure. But the sense of loneliness was always there, a dull ache in my chest that never fully disappeared. I had friends, but they couldn't understand what I was going through. They had families who loved them, who supported them, who wanted them. I was a ghost in my own home, a daughter in name only. Graduation day was supposed to be a celebration, a milestone marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. For me, it was the day I finally walked away. I had spent the months leading up to graduation planning my exit. I had been accepted to a university in Boston, a school far enough from home to provide distance but close enough to feel like I could manage the transition. I had saved enough money to cover the first few months of living expenses. I had found a roommate through an online forum, a girl named Chloe who was also looking for affordable housing. The night before graduation, I packed 2 suitcases. I took my clothes, my books, my laptop, and the small box of keepsakes I had accumulated over the years. I left behind everything else, everything that connected me to my childhood, to my family, to the person I had been. I wrote a note. It was brief, just a few lines that I had rehearsed in my head 100 times. I'm becoming exactly who you said I am, someone who doesn't belong to you. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Please don't look for me. I left the note on the kitchen counter, next to the coffee maker my mother used every morning. Then I picked up my suitcases and walked out the front door. I didn't look back. Moving to Boston was both terrifying and liberating. The city was overwhelming, full of noise and crowds and endless possibilities. My apartment was tiny, a cramped studio in a less-than-ideal neighborhood, but it was mine. No one could take it away from me. No one could ground me or punish me or make me feel invisible. My roommate Chloe was a student at the same university, a cheerful extrovert who quickly became my closest friend. She understood my situation without needing to be told. She had her own family drama, her own reasons for wanting to escape. We were 2 lost girls trying to find our way. Community college was my new beginning. I took classes during the day and worked as a waitress at night, my schedule packed with obligations that left little time for self-pity. The waitressing job was demanding, the hours long and the tips unpredictable. But it paid the bills and kept me alive. The early years were brutal. I lived on rice, beans, and the occasional free meal from work. I wore the same few outfits until they were threadbare. I couldn't afford health insurance or dental care or any of the things that normal people took for granted. I got sick and powered through because I couldn't afford to miss work or class. There were nights I sat on the floor of my tiny studio, surrounded by textbooks and empty coffee cups, wondering if I would ever feel like I belonged somewhere. The loneliness was crushing. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything I had lost. My family. My childhood. My sense of identity. But I also felt a fierce pride. I was doing it. I was surviving. Every class I passed, every shift I worked, every dollar I saved was a victory. I was proving to myself that I could make it, that I didn't need anyone else. I discovered marketing and branding during my second semester at community college. It was a required course, something I had signed up for without much thought. But the moment I started learning about consumer psychology, brand storytelling, and the power of identity, something clicked. I understood it intuitively, like I had been waiting my whole life to find this particular piece of the puzzle. The professor, Dr. Lawrence, was a passionate woman who had worked in the industry for decades. She saw something in me, some spark of potential that I hadn't recognized in myself. She took me under her wing, offering guidance and encouragement that I had never received from my mother. "You have a natural gift, Elena," she told me after I submitted a particularly strong project. "You understand people. You understand their stories. That's what branding is, storytelling. And you're a storyteller." I poured myself into my studies. I read everything I could about marketing, advertising, brand identity. I did extra credit projects, volunteered for internships, networked with professionals in the field. I was determined to build a career that would make me independent forever. By the time I transferred to a 4-year university on scholarships and grants I had earned myself, I had a clear vision of my future. I would succeed. I would create something meaningful. And I would do it all without my mother's help. The university was a bigger world than I had anticipated. The students came from everywhere, from backgrounds wealthier and more established than mine. I felt out of place sometimes, an interloper among people who had everything handed to them. But I was also better than most of them. I had worked harder, sacrificed more, and developed a resilience that they couldn't match. I joined the marketing club, competed in case competitions, and started freelancing for small businesses on the side. The work was small at first, but it grew. I built a portfolio of projects that demonstrated my skills and my unique approach. I also started dating, tentatively at first, then more seriously. There was a girl named Sarah, a literature major with a brilliant mind and a kind heart. We were together for 2 years, and she showed me what it felt like to be loved without conditions. The relationship didn't last, but it taught me that I could trust someone, that not everyone would reject me. Graduation day was bittersweet. I had achieved everything I had set out to do, earning my degree with honors and making connections that would serve me for years. But there was no family there to celebrate with me. No mother beaming with pride, no father giving me a congratulatory hug, no sister bickering good-naturedly. I took myself out for a cheap dinner and felt proud anyway. The years that followed were both the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I moved to New York City with $800 in savings, a growing portfolio, and a dream. I started as an intern at a small branding agency in Manhattan, working long hours for little pay, doing whatever was asked of me and more. The work was intense. The agency was understaffed and overworked, and I was given responsibility far beyond my official title. I worked nights and weekends, sleeping on my office couch when deadlines were tight. I learned to navigate the complex world of corporate clients, to manage demanding expectations, to deliver work that exceeded what was asked. The agency's founder, a tough but fair woman named Patricia, recognized my potential. She promoted me quickly from intern to junior strategist, then to senior strategist. She mentored me, challenged me, and prepared me for the leadership roles that would eventually come. "I've never seen anyone with your drive," she told me during my performance review. "You're going to be running this place someday. Or, more likely, you'll start your own." The thought had been percolating in my mind for months. I had ideas, visions, dreams that I couldn't fully realize within someone else's company. I wanted to build something of my own, something that reflected my values and my approach to branding. I wanted to tell the stories that I thought needed to be told. The decision to start my own agency was terrifying. I would be leaving a stable job with good pay and benefits to enter the uncertain world of entrepreneurship. I might fail. I might lose everything. But the alternative, staying in someone else's shadow, felt like a kind of death. I founded Voss and Collective at age 25. The name was a deliberate choice, a reclamation of my family name. Voss was the name my mother had tried to take away from me, the name she had declared I didn't deserve. By claiming it for myself, by building a successful company under that name, I was rewriting the narrative. The first years were brutal. I worked 80-hour weeks, 7 days a week. I slept on the couch in the tiny office I rented. I reinvested every dollar into the business, leaving almost nothing for myself. I pitched to anyone who would listen, facing rejection after rejection. But my work was different from what other agencies were offering. I focused on storytelling, on authentic brand identities that connected with people on an emotional level. I understood that people don't just buy products, they buy stories, values, a sense of belonging. My campaigns were designed to create those connections. Clients started to notice. My first big break came from a boutique hotel chain that wanted to rebrand. They were struggling to compete with larger competitors, their identity muddled and inconsistent. I created a campaign that told their story, their history, their unique personality. The results were immediate and dramatic. Bookings increased. Reviews improved. The hotel chain became known as a destination for travelers seeking something authentic. Other clients followed. A regional coffee roaster. A sustainable fashion brand. A nonprofit working with at-risk youth. Each project was a chance to tell a meaningful story, to create something that mattered. And each success built my reputation. I also started speaking at industry conferences, sharing my approach to branding and storytelling. People were drawn to my energy, my passion, my commitment to authenticity. They wanted to know how I had created a successful agency with so little experience and so few connections. I told them the truth. I had been given a choice, to give up or to fight. I chose to fight. By age 28, Voss and Collective had 15 employees and major national clients. We had won multiple industry awards, and I was being featured in magazines as a self-made founder. The story of how I had built my agency from nothing, with no family support, became part of my public narrative. I didn't hide my past. I used it as inspiration. At 31, we landed our biggest client yet, a Fortune 500 company that was struggling with its brand identity. The campaign I led was one of the most ambitious I had ever undertaken, a complete overhaul of how the company presented itself to the world. The results were remarkable. Revenue soared, brand recognition improved, and the campaign became a case study in business schools. We expanded our studio, moving into a beautiful Tribeca space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a rooftop garden. We hired more people, bringing on talented designers and strategists who shared my vision. The company culture I had built was everything I had never received: support, collaboration, mutual respect. We were a family, the kind of family I had always wanted. My personal life also flourished. I met someone special, a woman named Maya who was a photojournalist. She was intelligent, compassionate, and understood my need for independence. We built a relationship based on mutual respect and shared values. We had a small apartment in Brooklyn, a dog we both adored, and a life that felt like home. But the shadows of the past remained. I still had moments, usually late at night, when the old wounds would surface. I would remember the reunion, my mother's cold voice, the smirking triumph on Madison's face. I would wonder if I would ever truly move on. The silence between us had grown into an unbreachable gulf. My mother had tried to reach out over the years, sending cards and emails that I never responded to with more than a few sentences. She wanted forgiveness. She wanted to be part of my life. But I couldn't forget what she had done, couldn't overlook the years of rejection. My father tried too. His messages were always formal, always careful. He expressed pride in my success, regret for his silence, and hope for reconciliation. I responded politely but kept him at a distance. He had failed me when I needed him most, and I couldn't fully trust him again. Madison reached out occasionally, usually when she needed something. She was the same person she had always been, charming and self-centered, expecting the world to revolve around her. I offered her nothing. I had built my life without her, and I didn't need her approval or her company. The family dynamic had shifted. My mother's favoritism had consequences she hadn't anticipated. Madison, who had been given everything, never learned to stand on her own. She relied heavily on my parents, moving back home after college, struggling to maintain a career. The golden child was tarnished. I watched from afar, through mutual friends and occasional news articles, as my mother's world crumbled. She had invested everything in Madison, and her investment had failed. Meanwhile, the daughter she had thrown away had become a success beyond her imagining. The award nomination came as a surprise. The National Branding Excellence Award was one of the highest honors in the industry, and I had been shortlisted among some of the most prestigious names in the field. When my team told me I was a finalist, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Pride, certainly. But also a deep sadness that there was no one in my family who could truly share this moment with me. They encouraged me to invite my parents. It's a chance for closure, Elena. A chance to show them what you've become. I hesitated. The idea of seeing my mother again, of having her in that room, of risking the emotional turmoil it would bring, was terrifying. But a part of me, the part that still wanted to be seen, wanted to be acknowledged, wanted to be loved, agreed. I sent my mother an invitation. She replied immediately, her message full of excitement and hope. She would come. She wouldn't miss it. The night of the ceremony was beautiful. I wore a stunning black gown that I had chosen specifically for the occasion, elegant and powerful, a statement of who I had become. The venue was a grand ballroom in Manhattan, filled with industry leaders, influencers, and the who's who of the branding world. I spotted my mother and father in the audience as the ceremony began. She was wearing a dress I had never seen, clearly chosen for the occasion. Her face was a mask of pride and anxiety, her eyes scanning the stage, searching for me. She had wanted this for so long, to be part of my success, but she had done nothing to earn it. My father sat beside her, looking uncomfortable in his formal wear, his eyes darting around the room. He was proud, I could see that, but he was also aware of how much ground there was to cover, how much damage had been done. When they called my name as the winner, the world seemed to freeze. I walked to the stage on legs that felt steady, my heart pounding with a mixture of triumph and sorrow. I accepted the award, a beautiful crystal sculpture, and turned to face the crowd. This is the moment my mother finally understands. I looked out into the audience and saw her. She was crying, tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth. She was seeing her daughter, the daughter she had publicly disowned, at the pinnacle of her career. She was realizing that the woman on that stage was someone who had succeeded beyond anything she could have imagined. My speech was brief and heartfelt. I talked about the importance of resilience, the power of self-belief, and the incredible team that had supported me. I didn't mention my mother. I didn't mention my family. This was my moment, and I had earned it alone. After the ceremony, the reception was crowded. People swarmed around me, offering congratulations, wanting to network, wanting to be part of my success. I talked to executives and journalists, accepted business cards and invites, and slowly worked my way through the room. Then I saw her. My mother had been waiting at the edges, watching me, waiting for an opening. She approached with my father trailing behind, her eyes still red from crying. "Elena," she said, her voice trembling. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. You are my daughter. You are my daughter, and I am so proud of you." I looked at her calmly. The years of rejection, the public humiliation, the silence and loneliness, all of it was there in that moment. But I was no longer the girl who had cried herself to sleep. I was the woman who had built an empire from nothing. "No, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "I became exactly what you said I was, someone who doesn't belong to you. And I'm happier for it." The pain in her eyes was real. I could see it, the recognition that she had lost me, that 15 years of silence and independence couldn't be undone by a few words at an awards ceremony. She had thrown me away, and I had built a life without her. My father stepped forward, his expression pained. "Elena, please. We just want to be part of your life. We want to know you again." "You had your chance," I said. "You had years to be my parents, and you chose not to. I don't need you anymore." I walked away from them, leaving them standing in the middle of the reception hall, watching the daughter they had rejected disappear into the crowd. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but it was also the most necessary. The aftermath of the ceremony was complicated. I had always known that I would eventually face my mother, that there would come a moment when our paths crossed and I would have to choose how to respond. I had prepared for it, rehearsed it in my mind, but the reality was still painful. I spent the next week processing my emotions. I talked to Maya, who listened without judgment. I journaled, pouring out my thoughts and feelings in the pages of my notebook. I worked, channeling my energy into my creative projects. Slowly, I found a kind of peace. My mother continued to reach out after the ceremony. She sent emails, letters, messages through mutual friends. She wanted to explain herself, to apologize, to rebuild a relationship that had been broken for 15 years. But I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I would ever be ready. The distance between us had become too great. I had built my life without her, created a world where she had no place. I wasn't sure if I wanted to let her in, even a little. The rejection had shaped me, and I was afraid that opening the door would somehow undo everything I had accomplished. But I also knew that forgiveness wasn't for her. It was for me. Holding on to the anger, the resentment, the pain, was like drinking poison and expecting my mother to die. It was hurting me more than it was hurting her. I started working with a therapist, someone who helped me untangle the complex web of emotions I had been carrying for years. I explored my childhood, my mother's behavior, my own responses. I began to understand that my mother's rejection wasn't about me, it was about her insecurities, her limitations, her inability to love unconditionally. I also started to see my mother as a flawed human being, not a villain. She had made terrible choices, had hurt me deeply, but she was also a product of her own upbringing, her own trauma. That didn't excuse what she had done, but it helped me make sense of it. Over time, I allowed a small opening in the wall I had built around my heart. I started responding to my mother's messages, brief replies that acknowledged her existence without inviting her in. I agreed to occasional phone calls, stilted conversations that were always awkward but occasionally meaningful. The progress was slow, almost imperceptible. There were setbacks, moments when my mother said something that triggered old wounds, times when I pulled away and retreated into my silence. But there were also moments of connection, small glimpses of the relationship we might have had. My father tried to help. He was the mediator, the peacemaker, always trying to bridge the gap. He expressed regret for his silence, his inability to protect me when I needed him most. I accepted his apology, but I didn't forgive fully. Trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. Madison remained a complicated figure. She was still the golden child, still struggling with the consequences of a lifetime of favoritism. She reached out to me occasionally, trying to build a relationship, but I kept her at a distance. I didn't trust her, and I couldn't forget the smirking triumph on her face at the reunion. As the years passed, I built my chosen family. Maya became my partner, my confidant, my support system. My team at Boss and Collective became like family, people I trusted and relied on. Friends from college, colleagues from the industry, neighbors from my Brooklyn apartment, they all filled the spaces my biological family had left empty. I also expanded my philanthropic work. I donated to organizations that supported young women from difficult backgrounds, mentored aspiring entrepreneurs, and spoke at events about resilience and self-belief. I wanted to give others what I hadn't received: support, encouragement, belief in their potential. My art continued to evolve. I still painted in my free time, creating pieces that explored themes of identity, belonging, and chosen family. I had exhibitions in small galleries, sold pieces to collectors, and used my art as a way to process my emotions. The process was healing, a way to transform pain into beauty. The business continued to grow. Boss and Collective became known as one of the most innovative agencies in the country, a destination for clients who wanted to tell meaningful stories. We won more awards, expanded into new markets, and built a reputation for excellence. My net worth crossed 8 figures, but the money was less important than the meaning. When I look back on my journey, I see a straight line from the 16-year-old girl standing frozen in front of her extended family to the woman I am now. The pain, the struggle, the loneliness, all of it was necessary. It forged me into the person I needed to become. My mother's words at the reunion had been meant to destroy me. Instead, they set me free. They gave me permission to stop trying to earn her love, to stop seeking her approval, to become the person I was meant to be. She had tried to erase me, and I had become unforgettable. The silence between us, the distance I had maintained, was not a punishment. It was a boundary. It was protection. It was the way I told the world that I would never be invisible again. I think about the 16-year-old girl sometimes, the one who was publicly humiliated, the one who cried herself to sleep, the one who believed she didn't deserve love. I want to tell her that she was wrong. I want to tell her that she was always enough, that the problem was never her, that the broken people were the ones who couldn't see her worth. I want to tell her that she will survive, that she will thrive, that she will build a life so extraordinary that the people who rejected her will be forced to acknowledge her success. I want to tell her that becoming the daughter her mother described was the greatest gift she ever gave herself. My mother still reaches out. She still sends messages, still leaves voicemails, still wants a relationship. I've allowed her limited access to my life, polite exchanges that acknowledge her existence without opening up old wounds. We have lunch twice a year, always in public, always carefully neutral. The old pattern still arises sometimes, dismissive comments, unasked for criticism, but I'm no longer affected. I'm not trying to earn her approval. I have my own approval now. My father and I have built a better relationship. He still struggles with his passivity, but he's making an effort. He calls regularly, expresses interest in my work, visits my studio when he's in town. I've accepted his apology, even if I haven't fully forgotten his failures. He was a victim of my mother's dominance as much as I was, and his silence was a survival mechanism. Madison is still struggling. The favoritism that had once protected her became a curse. She never learned self-reliance, never developed the resilience to face challenges. She lives near my parents, depending on them for support, her life a series of unfulfilled promises. She reached out to me a few years ago, asking for help, and I offered some limited advice. But I kept my distance. She had chosen her path, and I had chosen mine. The awards ceremony was a turning point. It forced my mother to finally see me, really see me, as the woman I had become. She attended my subsequent speaking engagements, saved articles about my work, and followed my career with obvious pride. But the moment was brief, a crack in the wall that quickly closed again. The distance remained. I still have moments of pain. They come unexpectedly, sometimes triggered by a memory, sometimes by nothing at all. I'll be walking down the street and suddenly remember the way my mother looked at me at the reunion, the coldness in her eyes, the dismissal in her voice. The wound will open, fresh and raw, and I'll have to work through it again. But the moments are fewer now. They're shorter. The pain has dulled, replaced by a quiet acceptance. I am who I am because of everything I've experienced. The rejection made me stronger. The loneliness made me independent. The struggle made me successful. I've become someone who doesn't need anyone's approval. I've become someone who can stand on her own, surrounded by the family she chose. I've become someone who is recognized and celebrated, not because of who she's related to, but because of what she's done. The greatest revenge against someone who told you that you don't deserve to be loved is to become so successful, so powerful, so undeniably extraordinary, that their absence becomes their punishment. That's my story. A mother who publicly disowned me. A sister introduced as her only child. 15 years of independence, struggle, and relentless self-made success. And one award night where my mother finally saw the woman I became without her. The silence I maintained was my boundary, my armor, my protection. The distance I kept was my right, my choice, my way of telling the world that I would never let anyone make me feel invisible again. I built a life so full, so successful, and so complete that my mother's absence became her punishment. She lost me forever, and nothing she could say would change that. The daughter she threw away became someone the world celebrated. And that celebration wasn't about proving a point. It was about becoming the person I was always meant to be. I will always be the daughter who didn't belong. But I've made my peace with that. I built a life where I belong, surrounded by people who love me, doing work that matters. The rejection was a gift in disguise. It set me free.